Well, it's Monday. Let's do the Monday thing. Cheers. Welcome back, everybody, to me doing the thing that I always do on Mondays, which is weekly navel-gazing, where we talk about all the books I read last week, all the books I plan to read this week, all the videos I made last week, all the videos I plan to make this week, and, general rambling of sorts, I guess. Yeah, let's start with books that I read. I did read some. Isn't that good? I did read, of course, A World Without Work by Daniel Susskind, which was good. Compared to, say, The Technology Trap by that other guy, Carl Benedict Frey, which was not as good. So this one, A World Without Work, looking at, how to use automation and so forth to, how to deal with the fact that maybe people need less work, and what to do about all of that. And that was, a good book. And then, of course, I did read the book that I wanted to read last week, which is No Life Forsaken by Stephen Erickson. Came out on Tuesday. I finished it on Wednesday. It is really good. I really, really enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun with it compared to, say, The God Is Not Willing, which is also a good book, but I feel this one, No Life Forsaken, it just worked better for me. But that's just personal opinion here. Then I did read The Attention Merchants by Tim Wu, which is a book about advertisement throughout the 20th and 21st century, how it happens on, say, posters and movie theaters, and then on television, and then on computers, and now on mobile phones, and how all of that kind of stuff is good or bad, mostly bad, in all kinds of ways. Good book. I am glad I've read it, and now I am currently reading, and by the time you're watching this, I will probably be done with it. Bad Company by Megan Greenwell, which is a book about private equity and how it is bad, maybe. So that's my reading at the moment. So the question is, what will I be reading this week once I'm done with the Bad Company book? Well, good question. On the one hand, I will definitely read The Extraction Industry by Tim Wu, which comes out tomorrow and is about, the way capitalism works at the moment, which is, to say, poorly. So I'm going to read that. Beyond that, I don't know what I'll be reading this week. There are options. Technically, possibly, who knows, because it's all a big mystery. Lies Weeping, the next Black Company novel by Glenn Cook, is supposed to come out tomorrow in audio format. Now, the interesting part is, of course, that audiobooks, that so far, beyond one link on Amazon.com, not even on Audible, I haven't seen it anywhere. So I don't know whether that will actually happen tomorrow or not. Which means that should it show up tomorrow in one way or another on one of the different places that sell audiobooks, then I will, of course, listen to Lies Weeping by Glenn Cook. That, I think, goes without saying. If not, I don't know. So that's a book that I might be listening to this week if it shows up. Another one that I have potentially on the list is The Buffalo Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones. It sounds good. I've always wanted to try Stephen Graham Jones, so there we go. That's that's a very simple plan here, right? Beyond that, I don't know what I'll be reading. If you have suggestions, put them down below. I sometimes even, follow some of those suggestions. Sometimes I don't. So that's the reading plans for this week. What about videos, you may ask? Well, I did make some. In fact, I did make videos both for Kirinya and for Tendaleo's Story by Ian MacDonald, and they're up. And unfortunately, the one for Tendaleo's Story had technical problems, by which I mean something went wrong with rendering and editing, and it was black, like no image, and I had to play around with that to get it back to actual having visibility and so forth. That was frustrating very much, but it is what it is. So these are the two videos that I made. I also hung out with Britain on his stream yesterday. Alex was also there. It was fun, so I enjoyed that as well. That's, I guess, okay, 2 videos I think is solid for 1 week. Well, what about videos for this week? Well, I do plan to make a video for No Life Forsaken. I wanted to make it yesterday, but I couldn't really figure out what I want to say about that specific book, compared to like when you look at like my older Malazan content. I usually made like these read-along videos, like, hey, for all of the novels. Since I didn't record those while reading No Life Forsaken, I don't have those, and that would mean either rereading the book already to make those kind of videos, or making just like one big video on No Life Forsaken for now, and possibly doing such a read-along thing whenever I will inevitably reread No Life Forsaken. So I need to figure that one out. But yeah, something No Life Forsaken will be coming this week, hopefully. So that's a plan. There will hopefully also be something else. We'll find out. I am still working on the AI video. I have started recording parts. It just takes a while, right? We talked about that last week, that what with me having decided to do this on, in that specific setting, I'm somewhat dependent on things like, weather, construction work, all of those kind of external factors, which makes recording the thing slower. So my plan is to sort of like record one chapter after another for that large video, and having it sort of like render in the background, and it will be up when it will be up. So yeah, we'll see. I should probably really put together the list of like 13 Karl May novels for like the holiday reading thing. We will find out. It shouldn't be too hard. I have like a rough list. I just should like record a video on that, so we have like everyone knows what to get into and what to expect, so to speak. We'll see how that goes. Maybe I'll figure that one out during the week. So that's my plans for videos. If something else comes up where I feel the need to talk, then that is obviously also like something that might happen. But for now, that's the plan. Finish the AI video and make a video for No Life Forsaken, and tackle everything else should it come up. So I guess a plan. Obviously, should Lies Weeping be available and I will read Lies Weeping, then there will be a video on Lies Weeping. Don't get me wrong. But since I don't know whether that will happen or not, that is up in the air. And that's kind of, the frustrating part with releases. It has become harder, like, once again, to talk about, like, audiobook releases. They have gotten weirder. Some publishers seem to be moving away from Audible, which is a good thing in general, but don't get me wrong. We don't want monopolies, and Audible is, for better or worse, more or less a monopoly with, like, 90% of market share in audiobooks. So people moving away from that is a good thing. It just makes it sometimes a bit harder to figure out which book to find where, because obviously some have, exclusives. Then, for example, with Golgotha by Lavi Tidhar, for example, that one was on Libro FM and some others, but not on Audible. So you need to find these audiobooks, and obviously there's a level of frustration when you need to suddenly have like accounts on like 5 different websites selling stuff. Convenience, as I mentioned before, is obviously a big deal there. So, and there are some audiobooks, some books that just don't get audio releases anymore. There's also that option, right? Or that have like an audio release come out much later than the actual like printed book. That's also something that could happen. For example, one book coming out later this month is, of course, The Butcher in the Forest by Premay Mohamed, which came out as a Tor novella last year. And I've wanted to listen to it for the longest time now, so I'm very happy that it is coming out in mid of November. But yeah, when it comes to talking about books, when you try to sort of like stay ahead of like what is currently happening in book publishing releases and so forth, and have something up as like a review or conversation or whatever you want to call it, like discussion video or whatever, there is a problem if I can't actually do that unless, I wait for like another year, which, were this something where that was like reliant more on like algorithm, like recommendations, and being up to date or whatever, then that would be a much bigger problem. Luckily, or who knows, luckily, but with the way this channel in particular is going, or like the kind of books I talk about and so forth, I don't think like being like close to a publication date is essential for what I do. Obviously, I try to sometimes when it's something that I'm just like really excited about, then I'll do that immediately when I get it. But like there's a lot of books that I talk about that are not necessarily that kind of bestseller, that kind of hype book where you need to be on, or not need to be, but like where it is advantageous to be close to a release date. But like, I can see this being a big problem for other people that are trying to do that. And of course, it can be incredibly frustrating when discourse moving so fast on bookish social media in general, right? Like, it's usually like 1 week after publication, everyone has moved on to the next thing already because there are so many books coming out and discourse has sped up so much that if you are, for whatever reasons, reliant on, say, audiobooks, for example, even if you are, not looking at like an algorithm or whatever, if discussion has already moved on by the time you finally discover that book, you're kind of fucked. And I think that's a big problem in general with how we do book discourse. There's obviously a couple of sort of like perennial favorites that you can always talk about. You can always talk about Malazan, right? There's an audience for that. The same way you can always talk about, say, Realm of the Elderlings, right? The Robin Hobb fan base is very solid. It's not going to go anywhere, and those people will always watch another Robin Hobb video because, there's not that much of it out there already. So there is a constant sort of like supply and demand kind of thing going on, if you want to use those kind of terms, right? There is always interest in Robin Hobb stuff because that interest is never fully overwhelmed. I guess there was like a time around 2020, 2021 where like Malazan content was a lot, and it has gotten less, but that obviously means that like the people interested in Malazan content are once again, I don't want to say starved for like videos, but there's certainly still people who want to hear about that kind of stuff. So those books obviously exist, but when it comes to other stuff, like even like say Joe Abercrombie, for example, right? Like The Devils came out in May, and hardly anyone is still talking about it. That story, that thing is moved on. People have moved on. People that were interested in it usually made their videos like 3 months before the book came out, and then a couple of people made one roughly around publication date, and now we have all moved on. Even with something as potentially big as Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson, like, Brandon Sanderson content is basically either I don't get it anymore because my recommendations are skewed in one way or another, but like there's not a lot of Sanderson conversation going on right now, and people are not really talking about Wind and Truth anymore. There's obviously people talking about specific elements of like the Cosmere or whatever, but like the hype cycle for books has sped up so massively that having like a 1 year delay for like an audiobook can have like a huge impact on people who want to also participate in the conversation, right? I don't know what to do about that. I think it is kind of frustrating, but I don't know what we will do about all of this. It's just like one of those signs that maybe the publishing industry is going down into some weird places at the moment. Who knows? It's certainly something that I've been thinking about a little, with the frustration around not knowing when and how to get like the new Glenn Cook book. And obviously there is a new Ian McDonald Tor novella coming out in February. I don't know if there will be an audiobook for that. There's still no audiobook for The Wilding, which was McDonald's novel from last year. I'm very frustrated about that, but like, what can you do? So the idea that every book will be also available as audio has sort of like, which for a time it seemed to be, it's sort of like where everything was going, but it has definitely moved away from that again. And there's certainly stuff that is just accessible in text in one way or another. And I, for one, I'm definitely frustrated by that. But yes, obviously I can use my text-to-speech or screen reader and an ebook, but it is a very, very different, a much more frustrating sort of experience. So there is that. And yeah, it's not exactly good, is it? One other thing that I found really interesting I wanted to talk about for a moment here is I got a message last week from someone, a company that wanted to collaborate with my channel for, referral links and all of that kind of stuff. Not really like paid sponsorship from what I can tell, but, give me other stuff, as I said, like, affiliate links and free membership on their site for a year, that kind of stuff. I did not actually consider that for a lot of reasons, and they sent me like 3 emails, which is a lot. And they're a company that is providing AI summaries of books for sale, which I find troubling. to put it mildly. Obviously, with the stuff that I'm currently working on with the AI video and so forth, there is no way I will make anything like I will collaborate with any AI companies that use generative AI, to put it specifically, right? Like, no way I can do that, like, on a level of integrity. But it was interesting to see the level, sort of like their insistence, like 3 emails in 3 days, or like, hey, here is this thing. Do you not want to do this? And there's obviously a level of grift to that, because if you get if you're a small channel like this one here is, right, like, I don't get a lot of sponsorship offers. Like, I don't get any that seem to be legit. Most of them are usually scammy, grifty kind of stuff, where it's like, hey, give us money and then you can do this, and we'll, there's some that, want to send you equipment, but you have to pay for it, and then you still make money, make an advertisement kind of thing for that company, and technically you kind of get a discount, I guess, but it's still, it still means you're buying new equipment, basically, and a lot of other stuff is even more grifty, because clearly there's not exactly a lot of money to be made for companies here. But it's interesting to get those kind of messages in something that seemed serious, in the sense that they were certainly a legit company that exists. I checked the website and everything. Don't get me wrong, but the whole industry that they were trying to promote, that they are trying to build, is in itself, once again, incredibly grifty and scammy, and I found it just on the one hand really funny that what with my stances on, say, artificial intelligence being relatively clear, I thought they thought that I would consider doing that. But on the other hand, I think it's also the questions how do I react if I get other sponsorship offers that are more sincere, or that are less clearly a no-go for me. What if, say, Audible would offer me sponsorship? Obviously they don't, because this channel is far too small and so forth. What if? Would I take that? And if so, what would be sort of the amount of money that I would need to sort of move in this regard, right? And I think it is interesting to think about that. And I mentioned it last week with the fact that these things obviously make very little money to put in my roughly $10 per month in ad revenue. That's roughly where I'm at the moment, which is, means if I'm lucky, I get paid out twice by Google per year. If I'm unlucky, it's once per year, because you only pay out after $70 are collected in your AdSense thing. There is the Patreon, which I'm always, and the channel memberships, which I'm always struggling with, because I feel bad asking for money. But what if a company offers me money? Is that something? These questions are less hypothetical than you might think, because you never know if something like this shows up, and then suddenly you are giving away something, I guess. You're selling part of your identity, or in this case, I would be selling part of my identity, my integrity, and so forth. And there are obviously ways of doing that that are less heinous, and there are ways of really selling out and so forth. But I think what with booktube, bookish YouTube in particular, being all about the claim that none of us are doing this for the money, we're just doing this because we love books and we want to talk about books, and we all pretend that we don't look at the numbers, and we don't get worried if a video doesn't well, we ignore the algorithm because we're all just in it for the love of the game, basically, which is true to some level, I would assume, for most people, because I don't think people actively lie. But I think it's also something that we are really good at deceiving ourselves into this, because a lot of these metrics are so insidious that it's very difficult to not kind of fall for that. And if out of the blue someone makes you an offer and go hey, you'll get I don't know, $500 if you talk about this one specific item, is $500 enough? Would I do this for $500? I don't know. Would I do it for 1,000? I don't know. Would I do it for 10,000? Probably yes, because that would mean I could pay off all my debts and all these other things, and basically solve a lot of ongoing, lingering problems that I'm not able to deal with in a relatively fast way otherwise. And I think it's easy to sort of have these great stances on money on YouTube in a lot of ways, up to the point when it suddenly becomes relevant and you suddenly get that, I don't want to necessarily call it temptation, because what with a lot of us on, YouTube, living in not necessarily the best economic circumstances, right? Like, there are people who are independently wealthy and have good jobs and do this really just as a hobby, but there's a lot of people who are, students. Students are not necessarily rich. A lot of people who do this as a hobby on the sides, who are maybe in strained economic circumstances, and then suddenly $500 for more per month is a big deal. And that's sort of like the pressure that a lot of us are under, I think, makes it important to think about what to do in such situations. Obviously, as I said, like, I'm not going to show AI book summaries. That's very much something I can't do, even if they would pay me a lot of money. Like, would have to be like insane amounts of money to do that, and that would very much like destroy any credibility that I ever had. Right, so hard sell. But like, what with something else? What if I've seen booktubers do like sponsored content, or sponsored content for, say, like one of those book boxes, or say an author an indie author, self-published author is running a Kickstarter doing for their books, and they get like, hey, do you want to talk about that and maybe advertise that Kickstarter? Is that something I would do? Because it would kind of feel closer to to what this channel is about in general. And to tie all of this back, it was interesting to see get these sponsorship things pushed this week while I was reading the attention merchants on the advertisement industry and how the advertisement industry has changed over the last century in all kinds of ways. Because that is sort of like what this is about at the end of the day. It's once again, it's advertisement, and it has shifted to micro influencers in all kinds of ways. And I feel like most of us have like very most of us lack sort of like a complex ethical framework for like how to deal with these kind of things, because it's not necessarily something that we expect to deal with. But with the way that the internet has changed and social media has changed, more and more of us do kind of have to deal with these kind of questions at some point, either as someone who gets these offers made, or as someone who has to wade through like content and like videos that people we generally look up to produce, and then there's suddenly we need to establish whether we still trust people who clearly sold part of their brand for in one way or another, like compromise their integrity up to a point. Like we need to figure this shit out, even on like the bookish YouTube side where people people are holding up that specific form of authenticity, and we're not doing this for money or anything of the sort. Like even there, we need to sort of like figure out how to do these things and be honest about that. So I don't know, it's just like something I've been thinking about a lot this week, because it is just weird that it felt weird in a lot of ways. Anyway, these are my thoughts for like this month, this week. Let me know what you did. Let me know what you read. Let me know all kinds of other stuff. Talk to me in the comments. I appreciate all of that. I'll be back with a video on No Life Forsaken relatively soon. Until then, I don't know, like, subscribe, comment, join Patreon, whatever. Do good things. Be cool people. I'll see you very soon. And until then, thanks and cheers.